In this presentation, we are going to demonstrate how easy it is to quickly deploy a complete Hortonworks cluster in containers using the Robin Hyperconverged Kubernetes platform. The first thing we need to do is log into Robin. After that, we are taken to the dashboard page that gives us an overview of the current activity on the cluster, as well as how many resources we currently have in use. To deploy a new cluster, we go to the Applications menu and then to the Bundles page. We are then presented with a collection of application bundles to choose from. Let's select Hortonworks. On the deployment page, we start by giving the application a name as well as a pool of IP addresses to choose from. Let's call it HDP 255. These IP addresses are used to configure the different pods when they are initially created. Robin currently supports Open vSwitch as well as Calico. Let's use the demo IP pool. A resource pool is a mechanism to logically group Robin host machines. This is used to control where the different tenants in the system are able to deploy their containers. In our case, we only have one. In the column on the left side of the page, we can select the components we need for our cluster. In each case, we can configure the resources we want to give them, such as memory and CPU cores. We can also define for some of those services how many instances we want to have. We can also review the different volumes that will be mounted inside the containers. The data itself will be stored directly by the Robin software to local or remote storage devices. We can define if we want to store the volumes on spinning disks or SSDs. Depending on the component, we can choose if we want Robin to take care of replicating the data or if the service itself will take care of it. In the case of HDFS, there is no need for Robin to replicate the data. Finally, we can look at placement rules for the component. Those rules are used to define affinity and anti-affinity constraints. We can thus define how we want or don't want the containers to be deployed. For instance, we can tell Robin that it should not run all the Zookeeper containers on the same host. On a small demonstration cluster like this one, we can simply skip those. On larger clusters, these affinity rules become very useful. Once everything is configured, we can have a look at the bottom line that sums up all the resources the cluster is going to have allocated in order to deploy those containers. Everything looks good, and we can now ask Robin to deploy and configure everything. Robin will then compute where the different containers should be deployed based on the resources we asked and the different placement rules, if any. After a few minutes, we have a running Hortonworks cluster, and we can review the different containers that have been set up for us. The page is automatically refreshed, and we're taken to the running application where we can review the different containers. At the top of the page, there is a dependency graph that allows us to review what was deployed and what the dependencies are. By scrolling down, we can see the different containers that are currently running and the different services that they belong to. We also have information about the containers, such as the host name, the exposed port number, and the container IP address. In the upper right corner of the page, we have a drop-down menu that allows us to get direct access to different consoles, such as Embari. Clicking on it opens up a new tab to the Embari login page. After entering our Embari password, we are now able to use it to manage our new Hortonworks cluster running in containers on the Robin hyperconverged Kubernetes platform.